Today I want to talk a little bit about going to Jehovah's Witness funerals or memorial services. I know that a lot of funerals of active Jehovah's Witnesses used to take place at funeral homes, funeral parlors. And then at some point it seemed that it was much more common for a Jehovah's Witness to be memorialized at the Kingdom Hall as opposed to being at a funeral home. Now, the Watchtower Society has an outline that they provide for a funeral talk, which is really interesting because you'd think that somebody who had spent years, or in some cases decades, or even entire lifetime as a witness that was affiliated with a local congregation, that there would be some of the a spiritual man, a spiritual person would be able to get up and speak some comforting words from the Bible, to speak from the heart about the individual that they're memorializing. And that doesn't always happen. It always has to go through a certain outline so that there's some brief comments made about the deceased and their life. But it's always given with the perspective of, let's talk a little bit about the biography of how this person came to be in the truth. When did they find the truth? When did they get baptized? The scripture is usually read from Ecclesiastes that says that better is the day of one's death than the day of one's being born. And the thinking is, of course, obviously, that at the end of your life, you've developed, or you've built a name, you've built a reputation with God. And so therefore, it can be a time of happy reflection that this person live their life in such a way that they would be in God's memory, and therefore, of course, called to be resurrected in the future. And then after a few moments of reflecting upon the person's life only as it relates to their dealings with being a Jehovah's Witness, then let's talk a little bit about the deceased person and what their faith was. And then it becomes an infomercial for the Watchtower organization, or to be a Jehovah's Witness. And then at the end of the memorial service, there's usually an opportunity or an invitation. If you would like to learn more about this amazing hope for the future, please talk to any Jehovah's Witness that you see here. So if somebody is already a witness and they're attending one of these memorial services, they already know all of this. So they're not the ones that are being spoken to. Comfort is not given to the family of the deceased, the friends of the deceased, as much as let's leverage this opportunity where somebody has come to our Kingdom Hall and let's get them interested in the message. But it's interesting that a Jehovah's Witness will not do the same thing when it comes to attending a funeral or attending a memorial service of a friend of theirs, even if it's a dear loved one, if that memorial service or funeral takes place in a house of worship. If it's at a funeral parlor, they will do that. But if it's in another church, they will not set foot in that other church, even out of respect for the deceased or their loved ones. So I do have some experience with this. My father died a few years after I stopped being an active witness. So I went to the Kingdom Hall for the last time at the regular meetings in about 2001 or 2002, as I mentioned in one of my other videos, one of my earlier recent videos. So fast forward to a couple years thereafter, a very dear friend of mine who was disfellowshipped, his father passed. Now, his family and my family have known each other for decades and decades. My friend's father performed the wedding talk for my parents. And so at his memorial service, I would have expected that there was going to be a significant turnout. This person was an elder. Both he and his wife served very, very faithfully for many, many years, had been an elder, had been a member in good standing for decades of faithful service. And yet at his memorial service, there was only 75, 80 people. That wasn't even the count of the local congregation. So most of the people in his own congregation, or many of the people in his own congregation, didn't even show up, which seemed to me to be very disrespectful, number one. And then the other thing is his disfellowshipped adult son was there. So my friend was sitting right in the front row during this memorial service. And what I had mentioned just a moment ago is exactly what happened. Let's memorialize this dear friend of ours by talking about when did he become a witness, what was his life as a witness. Let's talk about the hope that he had. Let's share some scriptures, and let's invite anybody in the audience who's interested to now become a witness or start studying the Bible with one of the Jehovah's Witnesses that's present here. When you're a witness, going to a memorial service is just like going to any other meeting. It tends to be, obviously it's a more somber tone, but you don't see a lot of emotionalism at a Jehovah's Witness funeral, because it would be a display of no faith. Because we're not supposed to be morose, we're not supposed to be emotional, because if our dear departed had been a faithful person, we know that we'll see them in the resurrection. So therefore, there's no reason to be overwhelmed with grief, because we know we'll see them again. So it seems to be at these funerals, and at this funeral of my friend's father, that there really wasn't a lot of sadness except on the part of some of the family members. So at the end of the memorial service, as the procession across the front row, where the friends were walking up to my friend and his family, obviously because he was disfellowshipped, they were completely ignoring him. So people were speaking to his mother, his other relatives, other family members, but they were walking right in front of my friend, and person after person after person couldn't even give him the milk of human kindness to meet his gaze or to say, "I'm sorry." And I'm watching that as I'm waiting in the line to walk up to the front aisle or the front row. And I noticed that one of our mutual friends, somebody that we had known for years and years in the congregation, stops in front of my friend and holds her arms wide open and gives him a great big hug. And when she did that, everybody I noticed was looking around at each other like, "Do you see what she's doing? She's hugging somebody who's disfellowshipped." And for me, who had, I had been an active witness for 30-something years of my life at this point, I'm looking at this not as an insider anymore, but as an outsider. And I'm thinking, how strange is that the act of trying to give comfort to another human being in their time of loss is perceived as some type of shocking thing and probably an inappropriate thing. And it was at that point that I realized how much you can learn by attending a Jehovah's Witness memorial service or funeral. So after that one particular display of affection, other people loosened up a little bit. And some people were also giving some type of expression of solace and comfort to my disfellowship friend. As did I. I gave him a hug. I told him how sorry I was. And when I talked to my friend, he has vowed that he will never set foot in another Kingdom Hall again, because of the fact that, okay, if I had sinned, if I had fallen short, and if I was deemed being unrepentant, he says, that doesn't change the fact that I'm still a human being. And in my darkest moment, in my moment of loss, Jehovah's Witnesses who claim to be Christian, many of them, most of them, wouldn't even make eye contact with me. They wouldn't offer me any basic human kindness, with only a couple notable exceptions. And when those people did that, they were viewed as somehow being lawbreakers by just being human. Now, several years thereafter, in about 2007, my father passed as well. And so my father, my family lived on the other side of the country from where I live. So I flew back to where my family lived to attend that memorial service. And what I experienced there was exactly the same thing. Now, my father had been a baptized Jehovah's Witness for, let's see, it was probably 65 years when he died. So he was, up until recently before that, he was the presiding overseer of his congregation. He was a city overseer. He was on the hospital liaison committee. So he had really given his entire life to the organization. And the friend of his who gave the memorial service, according to the Watchtower outline, I guess, did a fine job. But he followed the exact same path through this funeral discourse. Let's talk about my father from the standpoint of when did he become a witness? What were some of the outstanding milestones of when did he get baptized? How did he take a stand for the truth? And then it shifted gears into an infomercial for jw.org or the Watchtower. And then at the end, the appeal went out to those members of in attendance that weren't Jehovah's Witnesses. If you would like to learn more, just reach out to any Jehovah's Witness that you see here. My cousin, who lived again on the other side of the country, she lived in California, she is disfellowshipped. And she flew across the country to attend my father's memorial service out of respect for him. I spoke with her. Other people who didn't know who she was spoke with her. But one of my brothers approached me and said, "Listen, I know that her cousin's here and that she's disfellowshipped, so we can't be seen talking to her. So, Curtis, do you mind talking with her and maybe spending a little bit of time with her?" Do I mind? No, absolutely not. She's showing enough respect for our father that she flew all the way across the country in an environment that the expectation would be she was going to be shunned. I wasn't going to do that. When you're a witness, I think it's very difficult to see what it's like for somebody who's an outsider to be watching this display. To see that most funerals are devoid of any type of real emotion. And to realize that it really is just an infomercial. And I think it's unfortunate. We are the most human, I think, when we are not at our best. And at the time when a congregation is able to marshal around the family or the friends of those who just experienced loss, I think that's an opportunity to be the most Christian. And whether the people in the audience share your particular faith or not, just be good people to them. Just be human. Be Christian. Be who you claim to be. Because the way it is at most witness funerals is it's very telling, in my opinion, and based on my experience. It's not very Christian. Now, I know that the funeral program went exactly the way that my father wanted it to go, and I understand that. But there was nothing about that experience of being back in the Kingdom Hall and attending that memorial service for my father that made me ever want to come back. I hadn't been back to a meeting for many years prior to that, and going to that funeral service or memorial service certainly didn't change my mind. If anything, it reinforced the fact that I had made the right decision many years earlier. So the only reason I'm sharing this is if you ever attend a Jehovah's Witness memorial service or funeral service, just pay attention to how it goes and what type of human interaction you see there, because you can tell a lot about the organization just by being observant during a Jehovah's Witness funeral. Those are my thoughts today. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any comments or stories that you'd like to share, I look forward to reading them in the comments below. Thanks again for watching.